Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. You may notice one thing that I have changed the positioning of my mic because I got told my nose sounds were aggressive.
They are. I told you that on like January 2nd.
You did. And so I've been trying
Who did you listen to, Seb?
I listened to you.
Who did you listen to?
I listened to you, but then also I listened to Tanya.
We're coming hot out the gate, everyone. Sean's just right after him.
Right after, yeah.
Straight into it.
Well, no, this thing is, he did tell me about it. The problem is, due to the fact that I have hearing issues, I can't hear it.
Dude, it sounds way better now already.
This, I'm glad it sounds better. I was talking to Seb yesterday, and he said it sounded better, and I wasn't. So
it was Super Cyan Magical Girl who cracked it out of the park. What the heck?
Yeah.
Is that all it takes? Hey, Tanya,
Sometimes.
thank you.
Yeah. Sometimes, sometimes that's all it takes. And there it is, Steve. What's up, brother?
What's up, buddy?
Good to see you, pal.
So yes, that's why this whole thing has changed. And also, I do apologize about the last minute switch on the Rockstar poster. Tony will be joining us, but it'll be next Tuesday. I made that mistake. But Steve is scheduled to be
I like
here,
Steve better anyway.
Yeah, good to go. While I'm making all kinds of mistakes, you shouldn't make a mistake. Definitely hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. And make sure if you have any thoughts or comments, put them in our comment section. We read them and we put them up for us to discuss. So hit us up when you get the opportunity. Any thoughts, questions? Actually, before we do anything, Jake, we have not had you on here before. Give us a little rundown of who you are, where you come from, that good stuff, and then we'll dive into the convo.
Awesome. So my name is Jake Doan. Most people call me Coach. I'm a strength and conditioning coach and personal trainer. I have been for almost 15 years. I've worked with university basketball players, hockey players, and professional basketball players and rugby players. World round, I've lived in the UK and spent some time overseas and coaching rugby, and I lived in Wales for a time and finished my education there. I'm originally from Ontario, but live in Langley, BC now.
Glad you made it out of Ontario alive.
Yeah, sure. I made it out. I kind of got in touch with all of you through Such, who Shaun is very close with. I've heard way too many legends about Shaun Taylor.
Mostly lies.
Probably.
I hope so.
But yeah, basically, athletics, sports are my life. And I live to kind of assist other athletes now in just being the best athlete they can be. And my company is Show Muscle, Go Muscle.
I like it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you being here. This is going to be awesome.
A little bit more add-on.
It doesn't look like you have an app named WhatsApp.
Ooh, fascinating. We've got another
the robots are taking over.
Wow. So I think there is just one more piece to add to that, if you don't mind, Jake. And that is, and I'm not overly familiar with your entire backstory, but I do know that because today we're going to talk about mental health, and I think it's probably not a bad idea to establish where, like, your own personal journey to some degree on your struggles or not. I'm not suggesting get into mega detail, but just establish what your thoughts on mental health at a overarching high level.
For sure. So Shaun brings up a good point. So I am a victim of a very kind of vicious assault. I was assaulted by a group of individuals, which left me with occipital neuralgia, which is a chronic pain disorder of the neck, which leaves you with basically some level of pain throughout the day. It's just varying degrees depending on stimulus to my body. So training or even just being vertical for long periods of times can inflame those nerves, and I could have more pain. I was also blinded in my right eye and left with dealing with PTSD and anxiety and mental health struggles because of this attack. And I think it's been 10 plus years now since that occurred, and I've come a long way in my recovery. So I have a lot of, I was telling Big Bird earlier about just having a different perspective than a lot of people have with dealing with struggles and enduring and getting through them. So I'm happy to like open it up to you guys now, and we can talk about our subject, but that's where a lot of my insights kind of come from. So,
and the reason that I wanted to ask you to add that in is because there's a important distinction for people out there who are struggling with mental health, and it's predominantly between their ears. They have no, we'll call it, you're not missing an arm, so there's no evident issue physically. It's mostly mental, and I'm not suggesting ever for a second that one is worse than the other. But what you are facing, Jake, is to some degree some mental health issues, however big or small they are, but you have the constant physical reminder of, to some degree, some sort of pain that never goes away and always acts as, oh, I've got this, for lack of a better term. So I just want to draw that distinction out for folks out there who have mental health struggles and then mental health and physical health struggles in conjunction.
Yeah. The difficulty of consistent pain, of chronic pain, is it's a multiplier for all of the negative thoughts and negative stuff.
Well, it's a reminder. I mean, not only is it a negative, it's a constant reminder, whether it's negative or positive. Like, just scrub that right out of the entire conversation.
That's a good point.
It doesn't really matter to some degree as to this point. It's just a constant reminder. And I'm thinking of our guest yesterday, Mark Ormrod. His constant reminder is looking down at no legs and a missing arm. I mean, it's a constant reminder, whether he feels pain or whether he this, that, or the other thing. The fact remains that it is a constant reminder of all the other things that he is working through on his day-to-day. So just an important reminder that there are various degrees of mental health challenges, and there are associated physical reminders to those mental health challenges, perhaps.
Well put.
100%. Now, as Shaun said, and as we've alluded to before, this whole month we are going to be talking about men's mental health and different facets thereof. Over the next 2 weeks and change, 17, 18 days, I have some specifics, actual items that we're going to hit, and we're going to talk about some actionable stuff. But today I really wanted to hit on something very important that Shaun brought up earlier in his live chat. But before we do that, Steve, did you have anything to add on so far, what we've talked about in chronic pain, difficulties, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I've had 19 surgeries on my body, and I got to go overseas and work here the next month. And then when I get back, I'm getting my 20th surgery.
Wow.
Surgeries in 1 year, back to back to back. I mean, I like one after another. So when Jake was talking about chronic pain, it's a thing.
It's a thing.
It wears the mind down enough. So, but I think the thing that helps me is one, family, right? Or something to do to get, because when you sit static, there's a lot of weight being pushed down on you. If you're moving and you're preoccupying your brain with some other task or doing something or talking to somebody, it kind of pushes that to the side. It comes back at night, but you're not sitting there all day thinking about it. So
100%. Chronic pain is a hard one, man. That is a serious challenge, and it goes into my topic. Unless you guys have something else that you wanted to specifically talk about,
other than sense of purpose.
So my sense of purpose comes to coming up with this topic, and we were discussing this a little while ago. The Phalanx. The Phalanx, for those that don't know, is a military structure but it is a formation designed to hold a line. And every man along that front line and the rows in behind protect each other from harm while assisting the person next to you to assault the enemy, et cetera, et cetera. It's made famous in the movie 300 with the Spartan shields and the Phalanx line and all that good stuff, but it was used on a number of accounts throughout history. It was a really, really tip of the spear type formation because it requires a lot of drilling, a lot of training, but on top of that, a lot of trust and belief in the system, which gives you a sense of purpose, which is what I kind of why I want to talk about it. Because as you were talking earlier, Shaun, the thing that really clicked in my head was a line from the movie, which is accurate. And it says, every man depends on the person to his left to cover him from knee to neck. Period. And what I really liked about that was that you're not completely dependent on the other person, first off, right? He's covering most of you, but not all of you. So you still have to be able to defend yourself. You got to be able to see, you got to be able to attack, you got to be able to do all these other things. But the sense of purpose that you gain from the knowledge that someone has the unprotected portions of your body, the ability to work harder, be stronger, go farther, do more for that next person next to you is, I think, what drives a lot of purpose. You were saying about Normandy, people coming up on the beaches, and that were the guys in the in the boats headed to the beaches thinking about, we're going to destroy Nazism. Maybe. But more than likely, they were thinking about this guy right here and the fact that I'm going to cover him and he's going to cover me. And that guy right there and this guy right here. And everybody was thinking that, which gave everybody a sense of forward purpose, if that makes sense. Is that a pretty solid allegory so far?
For sure. I'd say.
So that's why I want to talk about the Phalanx, and we can use it as an allegory for men's mental health, in that we really, in nowadays, with the ability to communicate that we have, we need to start covering each other from knee to neck. What do you guys think?
I think that that's a great idea. And where it all falls apart is when the guy, if not the guy to your left or right, is when you think the guy to your left and right aren't doing their job to protect you to some degree. So you can 100% commit to the mission or to your role in the Phalanx. You can be all in. You can be amazing at it. But the corrosive nature of doubt in respect to, oh, I don't know if that guy's really squared away enough to watch my back, or has got my knee to my neck. I don't know if ... The corrosiveness of abilities or feeling that someone can look after you when you need to be looked after is kind of an interesting facet of mental health. So when you get with a team, whatever team that is, if you align with them and you feel that you're really doing your part to improve your mental health, but the team around you is kind of, we'll call it half-assing it. Well, how does that feel within your little Phalanx, where you're not sure if someone actually is going to do their job for you as you do your full best to proceed forward in your mental health journey? So to me, it's, you can do your level best, but you've got to feel no doubt that the system around you has your back.
And I think like developing a strong support system in your life, it should be like one of the most important facets. It's a huge part of my coaching, is seeking out people to coach that have good support systems behind them. You're more likely to be successful if you have a wife that supports your journey, a husband that supports your journey, and people in your life that are like, yeah, you need to lose weight for health reasons, or people that are going to support that. Your point on the person beside you having doubt and it being corrosive, Shaun, it immediately was the first thing I thought. Because if you're looking at the person left of you and you're thinking, I wonder if this guy's feeling the same way I'm feeling, you're already not focused on the task at hand. and it starts to muddy the water of the real objective, right?
I like that. Steve, you got any thoughts?
I just think it's a very foundational type of thinking where, one, you need support to get through certain things in life, right? And also you need to protect yourself and help yourself. So one can't rely on the other 100%. So both of them come into play, and kind of your analogy that you're using with the phalanx is just that in life too. Like when you're depressed or something like that, someone can try to sit there and try to help you and get you moving, but if you don't want it, you're not going to do it. So you have to dive in and help yourself.
I like that. Yeah, I
to the amphibious landing vehicles or vessels, using D-Day as the example as what I was referring to this morning in my live IG chat. If you imagine yourself in a amphibious landing vessel and you've got another 30 men around you, we'll say as the example, as you stand in the center of that boat waiting for that ramp to drop, if it's silent, every man is all in their own head, hoping that every other man around them is thinking the same thing. Like, let's go do this. I've got your back. Let's go crush. Let's go destroy Nazis, or whatever's going through everyone's head at the time, all the way through to, I'm not going to go. This is too much. I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to sit down when everyone goes out. So there's lots and lots and lots of things going on in silence in that boat. But what will sort out the boat is if someone, whether they're standing in the middle of the boat or at the front by the ramp or at the back, it doesn't matter who it is, where they're standing, as long as the right guy says something along these lines, boys, we got this, or however they say it. It's an opportunity for a leader to state times are tough and we're going to go crush. Now, I'm simplifying, of course. They're crude words to put across the point that in silence and hoping that everyone's communally minded, that's just not the right approach. Someone has to speak up in those silent moments. And then usually what happens is the guy on the other side of the boat looks over and says, hell yeah, that's right. That's what we are going to do. And through that momentum, all of a sudden, that silent boat is turned into guys who are committed, focused, universally aligned, and they're going to go kick some ass. Now, however it plays out once that ramp drops, that's for a whole different conversation. But the fact remains that in silence on that boat, it's not going to become more positive. But with talk, it will become more positive.
Hey, so
that's great.
Have you been to Normandy, Shaun?
Pardon me?
Have you been to Normandy?
Yeah, funnily enough, this morning, because it was, it's the D-Day invasion, today, 79th anniversary. When I saw that this morning, and to your point, I'd gone through social media and I saw lots of posts from all kinds of government institutions stating D-Day invasion, remember D-Day. And I saw 10, 20 of these things and I thought, what? This is so sterile. It's photos of guys sterilely getting out of the front of an amphibious landing vessel. And it's almost like a poster of nothing nowadays. Yeah. There's no emotion attached to it. There's no story attached to it. There's no... So I looked at the problem. I call it a problem. I looked at the puzzle this morning and I thought, this is not on. I'm tired of this. Why did we go? Why were we there? Why were those men in that boat? Why did they go once that ramp dropped? And it was all about to defeat evil. It was all about to put down Nazism. So my post this morning with ChatGPT in my own little brain, I typed out some things about why. And it was a photo, 10 photos of me with my two sons last summer at Normandy in Cayenne. The opening image is of a castle, the Cayenne Castle. And it's idyllic. You wouldn't know if it was taken in the 1400s, the 1900s, or the 2200s. You just wouldn't know. It's just this almost Monty Python-esque castle with some gorgeous sort of dry wheat grass in the front. It's a magnificent photo. And if you looked at it as the only photo, it would be idyllic, except at that point in history, that I was capturing in respect to the museum that we toured through that day, it was the center of evil. So how you interpret an image is for us to interpret until words are put to it. And the words that I put to those 10 images was this: why were we there? We were there to destroy evil. And no one should ever forget that, in respect to your own mental health as well. If you're in the silence in the vessel and you're not talking to yourself and asking you why, how, why, where, when, all of those things, if you're just silent in a boat, it's not a great place to be. So yes, I have been there. And yes, I did post about it this morning, because I think it's important that everyone not just read about a dusty history paragraph. They should try to go live as much of it as they can.
100%. We took the girls there last year, and I remember standing
fantastic.
I was standing on Point de Hawk looking out, and kind of going with what you're talking about is like sitting in that boat, and I'm putting myself in that landing craft, and I'm like, I could only imagine what was going through their head, knowing, and start taking fire when you get closer to the beach, and you can see the machine guns, the turrets up top and stuff like that, and it's just like the bombardment, and it's just like, holy crap! I mean, that's some intestinal
commitment. The commitment.
It was amazing, and it was, like you said, it was very important for my girls to see that.
Yeah, we were a month in Europe, and it was the only thing I wanted to do in Europe was ensure that my boys, with me, stood on that dirt, so that I could explain to them service.
Yep.
What you're talking about, Shaun, is developing perceptions of things you understand that other people don't as well. Like a lot of stuff in the news today is they don't care about developing a perception, whether it's good or bad. They just care about attention, right?
Check that box.
Check the box. But what you care about is developing the perception of what's reality. What does this day mean to veterans like yourself that have gone through that? It's you have a developed perception of war that's far beyond like my understanding. I right now, when you guys are talking about being in that boat and wondering about those feelings, I can't even like begin to feel what you're feeling, Steve. Like it's just not there for me. But I think developing perception.
It is now.
Yeah.
It is now.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of these kind of conversations is you weren't in Cayenne with my boys and I, but you now have been to some degree. And it's because you took the time to listen, you imagined, you considered all of that good stuff. And you have kind of been there now, more so than you were 30 minutes ago.
Absolutely.
And that's the importance of these kind of conversations. I'm not asking anyone to stand in my shoes and be me. And I'm not asking anyone to stand in Steve's shoes and be him. I'm just asking everyone to listen to what we have to say over here and think about things from your own perspective and see if it changes your mind on some things from time to time, like men's mental health. If your only idea of what men's mental health is a glib statement of it's Men's Mental Health Month in June and check that box. Wonder what July will bring. I'm not interested in that, and that's why we're into some meat and potatoes over here every day.
I love that.
You bring up an interesting point that kind of clicked in my head there, Shaun, was the fact that there's the old statement, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? But what I don't think is exhibited enough, or at least understood enough, is that those 1,000 words are going to be different for everybody looking at that picture.
They sure are.
Until someone takes the time to actually write it out so that it is understood consistently across the board. And that's where the writing portion comes in, is that in order to get the actual idea across of what it is you're trying to say, the picture only does so much. Right? You can take a picture of a castle and it can just look like a castle. Like, oh, wow, that's a nice castle. And somebody might decide to take a little closer look and realize that there's bullet holes in that castle. And then somebody might go, oh, wait a second, I recognize that castle. That's in Caen. Maybe I should, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that is again, as you said earlier, Jake, it's a developed opinion.
Yeah.
Right? That it takes time to develop that. Whereas what you're doing, Shaun, with those photos was, you're making sure that is understood. that like anybody that reads that and looks at those pictures is going to think about it. At least I hope they would. But
yeah, well, the trick is, I suppose, and I'm calling myself out. And if anyone's listening to this, hopefully you'll pay attention to why I'm calling myself out. As I wrote it this morning, I was struggling to write it because I was trying to determine how much I shape the narrative and how much I leave it open to interpretation. So the images that I put up, I didn't dive deeply into them. The written portion that I wrote is not so fine pointed that there's no other conclusion. It's open enough for people to interpret the images and interpret the written form, so that it's, I don't want to say it's now on them, but it kind of is on them to determine where they go from there. So I didn't say there's only left or there's only right. I just wrote. And I wrote in a fashion that leaves it open for people to consider things a bit more deeply rather than me drawing the conclusion for them. It's not easy. I mean, I don't even feel like I did a good job. And so, but that's important, that we try to do a good job and we try to put these kind of thoughts out there, so that if only one person in 100 thinks about it a little more deeply, then, well, we're one person further ahead.
Yeah. I do want to get back into the concept of the Phalanx here, but I do want to hit some of these comments real quick just so I don't forget about them. But Winterstorm, good morning all. Thank you for stepping up for the hard talk and real answers. Absolutely our pleasure. Space, what's up? Good to see you. Jassa, good afternoon, everyone. Taylor M, hit the like for algorithm, folks. Sachin Morshan, a good morning, team. Good to see everybody. So the conversation that we've just been going on, as again, it clicks little things in the back of my mind of the different little pieces of it. And I was picturing the landing craft from Normandy as a type of Phalanx in and of itself, right? And you're talking about a boat with 40 guys around you, and that's one thing. That's one contained.
They're all sitting in a shield.
They're all sitting in a shield, exactly. Now, you're going to be able to look over the top of the other boats, and you're going to see other boats get hit. You're going to see other boats topple. You're going to see people jump out. You're going to see all kinds of things. But there's going to be so many that continually advancing forward that you're going to be able to take in a similar manner to what Shaun was saying earlier, where you have the one leader step up and go, we got this. And you're going to see that continual forward. We're going to take that, and then we're going to take that, and then we're going to take that. And it's this drive forward. But I think it's just the fact that you can see other people struggling in a similar fashion. Now, Normandy is an extreme case of that, right? Like that, when you're talking about struggle, that is probably one of the most epic struggles we can think of. You're fighting inland, uphill against a well-entrenched armed enemy. That's probably the hardest fight you're ever going to have. But that fight gets a little bit easier when you have another 40 guys 10 yards down the beach, and another 40 guys 10 yards down the beach, and you got another 40 guys 20 yards behind you that are going to be landing in about 2 seconds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And similar to the Phalanx portion is that your spears are out in front of you for a reason, right? You have to be able to attack the enemy, not on your shields, but just out in front of your shields. And so when we're talking about men's mental health, and we're talking about people that are, working together to move forward, it's not that anybody is going to be protecting you or taking care of you so much as we're in the same fight. And I'm going to do my best to take the enemy in front of me, and I'm going to keep my shield here for as long as I possibly can. I expect the people to do the same beside me, but I don't, I guess, maybe hold it against them if they start to falter, because I know what struggle they're going through, if that makes any sense.
It does. I'll use the landing vessel as maybe an example here. When you're on the amphibious landing vessel, you've got no choice. You're on it. The only other choice you've got is to jump over the edge.
Yeah,
because you're committed. It's out of your control. That's kind of like mental health, man. It's not all under your control. You'll get hit from the side and you won't even know how or why that happened. If your mental health starts struggling, well, kind of to some degree, that's the trajectory, man, and it ain't changing. So you've got to get right with the moment on, my only option is to face this head on. Or what other option do you have in that vessel? Face it head on.
Yeah.
And the difference between that moment, using your example, it doesn't play out in modern mental health, because in that moment, it was full steam ahead and that's it. That's all. But today, it's, I don't have to face it. It's not full steam ahead. It's not, I've got to face the horrors or the evil or get better or fight uphill or take that objective. It's none of that. It's shrug your shoulders and maybe just sit back down. Or worse yet, shrug your shoulders and walk deeper into it. So it's, I don't think that they're the same thing. I understand your comparison between the Phalanx and D-Day invasion and all of that good stuff. It's fantastic, except when it's a single man who's in the hurt locker in his house in the dark, wondering what to do, there's no Phalanx. And further to that, he doesn't have to go ahead.
Steve or Jake, got any thoughts on that?
You're right. Absolutely. On the landing boat, you know, there's no option to leave. There is absolutely zero option. When you're by yourself in the room, there's an option to do many things. You can turn around, leave. You can go further in. You can end it all. It's because of that static mind. And, you know, I learned through my chronic pain and the stuff that I have been through, and I think I'm just normal like everybody else. I think I have normal aches and pains. But my biggest goal now is to work with my girls to make sure that they don't have the hardships that I have. So injuries, and to keep their mental mindset right. So they compete, and that can wear an individual down just being in the zone constantly. And so they're in the gym right now in our garage working out. And so I think Jake, I think you might understand this, where you get clients that come in, they're preoccupied by lifting. They induce felt fatigue on the muscles, which gets them tired, which makes you not want to go home and, you know, and think more because you're worried about your sore muscles. And I tell you, felt fatigue on the muscles is the best for sleep apnea, man. You just want to go to sleep to recover, but it gives the mind and the body, when they work together, when you're lifting and working out, they're occupying. You're occupying a space where you'd rather just sit and just either drink or take pills and just sit and watch TV and be non-productive. So that's the initial part of where I say that self-initiation. The individual has to want to help themselves, because I can tell you right now, the phone, any one of us, and call someone that would be like, yeah, man, come on over. Let's go do that. That someone will take care of you. Somebody will. The hard part is some people have a hard time asking for help because they feel like they're weaker or whatnot. But I think we've moved past so many indicators where we think that someone's weak when they're asking for help, that there's more people asking for help. But I look at mental health. Well, I look at mental health as a personal growth, but a supportive growth. So there's two variables working together to make something happen. And so like Jake in his gym and helping a client, he doesn't maybe not realize it, but why he's teaching them how to do a lift, right? He's also helping their mental health. I mean, they're in there listening to him, and then that way they can reach out to him, and you just build that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, societal norms have definitely changed a lot over the last little while pertaining to men's mental health. I feel like it's way more accepting to have 4 gentlemen in a room talking about their mental health issues, where I feel like 5 years ago, there would be a negative stigma towards this. We would be a bunch of sissies kind of thing.
Which is hilarious, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I mean, it's straight up hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, no one ever has called me a sissy, ever.
No.
Or lived to tell
hilarious.
the tale, at least.
But it's hilarious that 5 years ago, I think you have kind of nailed it, Jake. It was about 5 years ago that someone might have thought that they wanted to call me a sissy about doing these kind of things. It's hilarious. I mean, it couldn't be any further from the truth, and yet somehow there's a weird little stereotype going on out there 5 years ago that this was not cool to some degree.
And anytime you're like, I think of like sports, athletics, warfare, everything's about winning and overcoming something. So why is mental health something not celebrated to like overcome, like everything else in the world? It should be a thing that we're like, oh man, you overcame your mental health struggles, awesome. Like you get to be celebrated for that, just like battling anything else. So yeah, I've never dealt with stuff like that where people, I think I was ahead of the curve talking about things, but there's definitely a point in time, I remember in my recovery, where I didn't want to talk about things with people. I felt vulnerable because of my situation, but that was a perception I developed myself. It was maybe thrusted upon me by society, but I developed that perception that, you know, maybe I don't want to be a burden on people if I tell them, you know. Meanwhile, there's 5 people, you know, in my family that are willing to listen and hear. So it's a lot of getting past your own hangups, and everybody has different kind of boundaries set in place because their own family life, like how their father treated or mother treated you, like everyone has different things put in place to protect them from themselves. Like, but you got a lot of people just have to get over that first hurdle of just accepting, being open to having a conversation.
That's a big part of it. Just being open enough to have that conversation is that is one of the biggest hurdles right off the bat. But we have some great comments and a question here that I wanted to get across. Tanya, thanks for coming, and thank you for fixing my mic and my nasal breathing issues, as Shaun liked to say earlier. She says context is key. Societal conventions resulting in returning many soldiers refusing to speak about the horrors they face is a monumental loss for us. Understandable, but still a lost chance to learn. I think that's a great point. As a society, or not even just as a society, I think even as a globe, after World War II, there was almost across the board, like, it was so horrible. Okay, everybody, let's just move on. Right? Nobody wanted to take the time to go, oh, okay, let's sort through the ashes and figure out what all the problems are, right? It was just shut up, put your body into work, and go. And unfortunately, it led down the realm of alcoholism, abuse, self-defamation, all kinds of really bad stuff that happened after the war. And unfortunately, as you alluded to earlier, Shaun, that was like a person ago, right? There are still living people that fought there that have barely begun to speak about it. So it wasn't that long ago. It was not something that we can say, oh, 400 years ago. It was so long ago that we can't empathize with the society anymore. And I think that's where it stems in terms of this next question, is that societally, everybody just like, nope, we're not talking about it. You're muted there, Shaun.
Yeah, sorry. Hang on a sec before you punch forward to the next comment or whatever. Why did they refuse to speak?
From my experience, from people I've talked to, knowledge. Nobody knew that was an actual issue, and a lot of it was because no one was talking to each other.
Why weren't they talking is my point.
Well, again, this is just from it's anecdotal because I've only talked to a number of few World War II veterans, but what they say is they just didn't want to deal with it. Right? The memories were too bad. People wouldn't understand. And that's the big one I get a lot, not only from old veterans, but from newer veterans as well. Nobody understands. I'm not going to tell stories about Afghanistan, or I'm not going to tell stories about Korea or the Balkans or wherever, because nobody understands.
Yeah, no one understands mag changes. No one understands the order of battle when you come under effective enemy fire, etc. But no one needs to.
Exactly.
Like my neighbor doesn't need to know anything about mag changes. How many rounds are in a magazine? He doesn't know. He doesn't care. But you know what he can do is relate as a human, and maybe better than most other soldiers who want to talk about mag changes.
Yeah.
And so the reason I'm being very pointed about this on refusing to speak, maybe they did refuse to speak because that was the norm. Because guys like maybe me, as an example, allowed it to be normalized that you don't speak. Or maybe guys like me normalized that the conversation tomorrow is going to be all about mag changes. But that's not what I'm interested in. If someone wants to talk about mag changes, that's for an entirely different podcast. What we're trying to do over here, I believe, is go a little bit deeper, not worry about mag changes, but talk about the issues that every single man faces, every single human faces, irrespective of soldier or not. And so the message that I would prefer to have currently is there's no need to refuse to speak because we're all openly talking about these things, irrespective of mag changes. We're getting to the deeper meat and potatoes of these subjects.
Yeah, 100%. Steve or Jake, you got anything to add on that?
I would say that it doesn't affect every veteran the same. People can walk this life with, they can compartmentalize things and carry on. My grandfather was in World War II. Again, he never spoke about it until his last year of death. He had lots of Nazi memorabilia, swords, and he told my father how many guys he'd killed. And he was never a drunk. He loved my grandmother. He had a good life. It was just, you can only assume why he didn't say anything, but I can't tell with any 100% certainty why he didn't. Maybe he just never felt the need, but he never talked to my dad about it or any of his sons up until the last year of his death. And it was them asking about it. It wasn't him openly telling them, but he lived a good life. And there was no super hardships, but I will say this, he was very active. He was constantly doing stuff, going places. And I just think that steady, consistent movement helps refresh the brain and it makes the body feel healthy. It's like working out. I think all of my clients that I speak to, all of them, if they're not currently in a gym, I get them to join a gym. 100%. That is the best thing for mental and physical ability. But yeah, so I would just say it just because I don't think it affects all of them, but all of them that I have talked to, that is the weird thing about it. They just never talked about it. Where now, if we look at the current wars, right, we close out, and we're still doing conflicts everywhere. It's openly discussed and okay to discuss about it, right? So that whole barrier went down where people feel free and open to come and talk about their stuff that they need to, because some people can house it in and live a good life. They can. Some people cannot.
Yeah, and so you talked about his, maybe not his sense of purpose, but his sense of what kept him focused, and that would be physical activity or some such thing. But do you think that there was a deeper sense of purpose for him other than physical activity and staying busy and et cetera, et cetera? Was there something else maybe that either he mentioned to you or you would guess it, that his deeper sense of purpose?
We've talked about it, my dad and I, before. He sincerely loved my grandmother. He did everything for her. So he was extremely happy in his marriage. She passed away and he lasted, I think, 1.5 years and he died. And it's just one of those things, that whole thing, like a broken heart. He's left without her. He did everything. And I grew up with him and he was always happy. I've never seen, he's a normal dude. He get upset about something, like he grabbed the wrong screwdriver or something, but he's just a happy dude. No big issues, right? And I think his sense of purpose was my grandma. I really do.
I'll dig it.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things I've noticed and talked to veterans from all kinds of different eras, is that the finding a purpose right afterwards is critical to the betterment of your own mental health, to deal with the issues that you have. Because if you don't have that purpose, then you start to, I should say, spiral. And there, as you said, I think that's a great point to make, is that not everybody was destroyed by the war, right? No, but not everybody was coming back in really rough shape. And a lot of it, I read this in Dave Grossman's On Combat, where he was saying that, one of the biggest predicators was the amount of time spent with your troops on your way home, right? So if you get to hang out with your boys that you just spent the last 3 years fighting with, and you're going to be on a ship for the next 3 weeks while it crosses the Atlantic while you're getting home, right? Or you're going to take 2 weeks to go to England, and you're going to hang out in England for a while, and then you're going to, there was a time span there that you could actually, unload some of that weight, but you were with the people that you were with. And then when you got home, you could separate, and it made it easier to integrate back into society. Whereas the newer wars, the stuff that we've been doing, it was 4 days and I was back in Canada, and that was it. So I went from, Afghanistan, turned in all my stuff. We hung out in Cyprus, got drunk for 3 days, and then I was home around my family. And there wasn't as much of a transition there. So I think that's a part of it as well. But Tanya's got another.
So when you got home, you're stating all of that to indicate that you were struggling then as soon as you got home?
I was struggling, but I didn't know I was struggling. And a lot of it was just false bravado. And looking back on it, a lot of it was ego. Was just, oh yeah, no, okay, I'm good. Everything's good. We're good. It's just, the fireworks freak me out a little bit because, yeah, it kind of sounds like gunshots and kind of sounds like artillery, and okay, whatever. But I would slough it off instead of actually engaging feelings. And I had an idea. But I think that was the big one, was for myself when I came home. I still had a lot of ego, and I hadn't actually talked to any of the boys about the stuff that we went through. We just got drunk for 3 days and then went home. And then we all separated because we go on post-deployment leave and stuff. So everybody.
So no Phalanx at all.
No Phalanx at all. No, just singular dude on my own, left to my own devices in my own head. And it was negative.
In this case, though, have you thought about, you go and do something like that? Do you consider hey, guys, I want to develop my Phalanx. Let's talk every Tuesday night.
And at the time, I didn't. Now, absolutely.
Yeah.
If with the information and the experience that I have now, I would absolutely recommend I would almost recommend for, the military, if you're going to send somebody overseas to do something, put them on a ship for 3 weeks with the crew and send them home. Let them disseminate amongst each other. Take that time and then bring them home. Mm-hmm. Versus 3 days and then fly them home. It was that Phalanx never got developed. Because I didn't do it, but also because it wasn't a developed system. Still isn't exactly. So I think this is a big part of it nowadays, that we have these understandings, we have these conversations. This is how we build the Phalanx. Mm-hmm. We create pillars, perhaps even markers on a parade, right? Look for that guy, line up next to him. Mm-hmm. And okay, you're good, I'm good. And then, people can line up and stand shoulder to shoulder with each other and say, okay, this is going to be a struggle. Let's get it. And then start marching forward, at least in my mind. Any other thoughts on that before we carry on?
I just want to say, if you haven't noticed, I think guys like you, Seb, Shaun, and Steve as well, are developing a Phalanx already. Even though it's maybe not intentional, you're developing a Phalanx for yourself. People like Such and all those individuals that are starting to come into your life through the collective. I think that's your method of developing a Phalanx, with whether it was intended or not.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
it sure is turned that way. Yeah.
The difference being, though, that when we started off the collective, it was with an idea of just to try to help but we had no formation in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I still don't know what the formation looks like, or how big it'll be or small, or how effective or not. But a guy's got to try. And that's kind of what we're doing in this month, is Men's Mental Health Month, is we're trying to make it better for other dudes. And if someone out there has an idea on what this formation should look like a month or 12 months from now, hit us up, because we don't know ourselves. We're just trying to have open, transparent conversations about meat and potato subjects that hopefully make all of us better through the courtesy of our guests, who are bringing broad and wide-ranging experiences, wisdom, and opinions that are making us richer for the moment. So every day over here, whatever the formation eventually looks like, it'll be what it's supposed to be, based on cool people like you guys today.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Steve, you got some?
He patted me on the back. Did you hear
I think
that?
so. I think so. You got a pat on the back from Shaun?
Just a small one, though.
Live one, though. That's intense. It's not even in the green room.
Yeah. I'll revert that when we get back into the green room.
He cuts it out of post.
Yeah. Steve, you got any points on that?
No.
Before we carry it?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So Tanya carries on with this, and I wanted to get into this because it's important. It says storytelling is how we disseminate that messaging. However, how do we creators do it and do it right by the people who sacrificed versus mainstream movies, books, etc., glamorizing the experience of war? And I think this is important because, as anybody that has been in the military knows, 90% of it is sitting around going, what is the actual holdup? And then maybe 1 or 2% of it is running around with your chicken with your head cut off kind of deal. I can't remember the old adage. I think it's like 10% absolute chaos, 90% waiting around. So do any of you guys have any thoughts? How do creators who haven't been or have been through the experiences, how do they do it right? How do they create and disseminate that message without glamorizing the concept? Any thoughts?
You're always going to have glamorizing, because if you're writing about it, you're making a movie about it, you're trying to make money. And so there's always going to be some glamorization, but a lot of people like true documentaries because it is close to the truth of the mission that they're watching, or a conflict that they're watching that actually took place, right? And so if you make a movie about it in Hollywood, right, and so you're going to have some untruths in the movie, and then when you talk to the people that were there, they're like, no, this didn't happen, no, this didn't happen. You know, they got to make the movie 3 hours long, right? And so we did a mission, and it took the entire team, and it took another team to get up in the woods to find this guy, and they kept hounding us to do these interviews, and all they wanted is a story. And so they made it sound like one guy did all this stuff, and it's just like, you know, there's going to be always going to be glamorization of these things like that. So, and the thing that I used to work with our department on a personal assistance team. So if you got in a shooting or something, right, you'd come talk to me and stuff like that. But everyone deals with things different. A rubber stamp that this is how we do it, this is how we deal with it, because everyone's different. Like if I talk to Shaun about an incident, he might be totally okay with it, and there's nothing wrong with it. He might just be fine. Where someone else might be, it might affect them greatly, you know. And so I always try to look at the individual. I understand the overarching messaging because you kind of have to broad spectrum it, but the individual themselves and how they deal with something is so much more important, because that's more micro than macro, you know.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think there's to your point, pal, there are overarching themes that we can all generally keep an eye on, but at the end of the day, every single human being is a unique puzzle, not to solve, but to work with, and hopefully help to some degree. So the storytelling part that Tanya was talking about, When I first started off doing these live chats, a friend of mine, his wife, had said, if you wanna be able to help people more, just do what you've always done. Just tell a story. You're a storyteller, Shaun. Just tell a story, man. Don't sweat the details, was generally the advice that I was given. And so that's kind of what I try to do now. But the devil is in the details. To Tanya's point, is how not to glamorize it. Well, one thing that you'd said, buddy, is people do tend to glamorize things when there's money involved. But I ain't making a penny. In fact, it's costing me every time I stand in front of this microphone. And so I don't have any intent to capitalize on this or commercialize this or commoditize this. And so, you'd mentioned that your family, you've written a book. Am I wrong? I think you'd stated that your family had put together kind of a coaching book. Is that correct?
Me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I wrote about the family foundation.
Right. Yeah. Right. And when you wrote that, you probably didn't have visions of the book paying for your new mansion.
No,
it was probably for a more righteous reason than buy another mansion. And so that's my point, is if you enter into anything with a righteous intention, with the right vibe or the right end state of, I just want to do good for people instead of I want to make money off people, you can tell a story and do it in a cool way that doesn't come across as disingenuous or glamorizing the message, I think.
100%. I think in that situation, Shaun, you always end up, even as a person like yourself, being a storyteller. If someone's telling you that, I imagine you've told a fishtail in your life.
Yeah, I have.
Right?
Yeah.
The fish was this big. I caught this massive.
Dude, I caught a way bigger fish than you've ever caught.
Right? I definitely caught a bigger fish than you before. But the thing there is, like, it's an actual problem, like, in our society now, that we want to all be storytellers in our own way. That's why we look at content creation as being such a massive driver of things in our society. We have, 20-year-olds selling ads for products they've never used until they're at their door. And everyone's glamorizing every story, every piece of content they could put on social media. And it's really, it comes down to integrity, right? It comes down to, are you being honest? Do you use this? Was the fish that big? And having some integrity in yourself to be honest and straightforward.
Well, while I was out fishing for sharks, I actually caught the biggest shark in the world with my brand new fishing rod made by ...
Sigma
That's
International.
kind of how the world is going, man. You're right.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky balance between, you're involved with a nutritional company that I won't name because I think they're doing great stuff, but I don't think that's our job over here to name these kind of things. But you're aligned with them for the right reasons, as I see it, and you're not pitching a false bill of goods. Just because you get some free stuff doesn't mean that you're out there pimping the wares. I don't see you doing that. And so there's a way to do it that's tasteful, that's right. But the trick is, of course, that takes time to better understand what that balance is. And at 20, you've got zero understanding of how the planet turns. So you're definitely going to do it wrong.
Yeah. Brain's not even fully developed yet. And you're making life choices. Like, we were talking earlier about when, like, people, men, women can't talk about all these issues. If you look at, like, different age categories and how often people, when they're younger, do talk about emotions, and then there's this social age gap where it becomes like there's no conversations. But kids, when they're younger, they talk about everything. Oh, my dad left my mom. Like,
there's no social filter whatsoever.
Yeah. There's and then they have to develop and protect themselves from themselves, essentially, and they start to put these little gears in place that are the gears that make them themselves, and they develop that perception. But if you are misguided by somebody who doesn't have high integrity, there could be major issues, and you could think that Shaun did catch a bigger fish than me when he did not.
Well, I guess it's for all of us to deconstruct the truth or not.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this whole thing is the fact that, and it just kind of clicked on me. Tanya put a comment on here that it kind of clicked in my head too, but it said, or I'm thinking, there's a point in time in your life, especially as men, where vulnerability becomes weakness when they're not actually the same thing. And I think a lot of it stems from, when you're young and you're just talking, right? You have no filter whatsoever. You say something, somebody makes fun of you, or somebody snaps back at you, or something happens that you then are hurt by because you were being open and vulnerable in that moment. And that changes your behavior to, I don't want to be X. I don't want to be Y. You skin your knee, some kid calls you a baby. Well, I don't want to be a baby. I'm never going to cry again.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leads into vulnerability being weakness. And Tanya said, Brene Brown defined vulnerability as the potential to be hurt, whereas weakness is inability to withstand a force or load. And I think it's a great distinction because vulnerability is something that we're lacking as men, I think, across the board. Emotional vulnerability, let me put it that way. And I think it's due to the fact that it's been seen or portrayed or kind of built into the structure of society that to be vulnerable is being weak. And I think that's where we struggle. And I think once we can get that out of our mind, that being vulnerable is weak, then we'll be able to have more of these open conversations and build our own little phalanx in and amongst ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, no one has called me a sissy recently. So
that's going to change soon.
I
might have to do it just cause now. We're just at over an hour right now. I know we just scratched the surface on this, and that we really, there's so much more depth to all of this. Any final thoughts before we shut her down and carry on with shutting her down? Steve, what do you think?
Believe in yourself and just keep moving. There's more people out there than you think that will help you. A lot of people don't realize that. All the clients that I've talked to about their own issues, I have to relay that, and they know, one, they're coming to me, right? So there's one. Family's a big one, but reach out to somebody, because someone will be there to help, and someone will come to you. I guarantee it. You're not by yourself.
100%. Jake, final thoughts?
Well, I would really like to share my thoughts on, much like what Steve just talked about, but finding what is going to make you content as a person and really discovering that. We talk about purpose a lot, and it's a very common conversation, but I like to use the word content in ourselves and not allow the things around us in the world and our perception of those things to affect what makes us content. Because there's going to be a lot of things that are always going to be going on around you, and your perception of that, your view of that thing, and how it's going to affect your level of content, that perception is the most important part, because a lot of those things aren't going to affect your level of content and your purpose. So just want to share that.
I like it. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, in conclusion, and I'm going to try to stick to the subject of men's mental health, sense of purpose. If you don't have a sense of purpose, that's by choice. No one on this planet is responsible to give you your sense of purpose. It's your job to get your sense of purpose. Once you get whatever targeted sense of purpose, if you don't have one right now, you could have one in 10 seconds. If you sit down and think real quick, what's my sense of purpose? Bam. Now you're off to the races. And as you head towards that race line, you'll find people who are going to help you get there. So your sense of purpose is your responsibility, will help you get to the start line.
I like that a lot. And it goes in line with the concept of the Phalanx to begin with, is that if you're going to be in the Phalanx, you have to show up prepared. Right? You bring your shield, you bring your spear, you bring your gear, and you've trained your way to be able to stand on that line. And I think
you bring your knowledge of your why.
Exactly.
And some tools.
And some tools. Exactly. And I think that's the biggest part that I could try to impart, I guess, to anybody that's struggling, especially men's mental health. Mark said it yesterday. It starts with me. Right? There will be people on my left and my right to help me, but it starts here. And it always will. So with that, as we learn how to better understand ourselves, as we build upon the brotherhood that is out there, we can all grow as men and as a society. We'll see you all tomorrow. Chimo.